My name is Evelyn Stroud. After nearly 20 years of loyal service, my boss handed the promotion I'd earned to a younger, careless coworker and thanked me publicly for quietly supporting her. I sat there, humiliated, my work twisted into someone else's victory. That was the moment I stopped shrinking and chose to walk away for good. If you've ever been overlooked or underestimated, listen to the end of my story and tell me, was I right to finally stand up and leave? What would you have done in my place? I still remember that morning. Not because something dramatic happened right away, or because the sky was falling. No, it was one of those Mondays where the sky couldn't decide between sun or rain, and everything outside looked like it had hit pause. It was gray in a quiet way. Ordinary. But in my chest, something had already started to crack. You know that feeling, don't you? When something is off before you even know what it is. I pulled into the lot behind ClearSpan Freight Systems like I always did. Same spot. Far enough to get a short walk in, but close enough I didn't have to time the weather. The coffee shop next door was already doing a slow churn of takeout orders. I thought about stopping for a muffin. I didn't. Upstairs, the office felt half awake. Fluorescent lights buzzing low. That faint smell of burnt coffee lingering near the break room. I passed someone humming along to a song they didn't know the lyrics to, and someone else already tapping too hard on their keyboard like the screen had offended them. My desk was still where I left it, same scuff on the drawer, same sticky note reminding me to call maintenance about the faulty floor vent under the copier. I booted up my computer like muscle memory. First thing, check the inbox. There it was in bold. A subject line that didn't sit right. Team check-in, 9 a.m., all hands, Conference B. All hands on a Monday? Called by Corbin? That got my attention. I clicked. No context, no agenda. Just a location and time, and at the bottom, the usual line. Let's bring fresh energy this week. Signed, Corbin Vess, Director of Operations. Fresh energy. From a man who, not so long ago, used to show up to meetings looking like he barely made it through the door. I remembered a time, not too far back, when I was the one who showed him where the quarterly reports were stored, when he still said, "Thank you," out loud instead of assuming the room owed him something. Corbin was the kind of man who figured out quickly how to smile without really meaning it. His eyes never quite caught up with his lips. He dressed sharper now, carried a mug from some seminar that probably cost more than my car payment, and talked in phrases that sounded borrowed from LinkedIn posts. Still, I wasn't expecting what came next. I scrolled down, just scanning for anything I'd missed, and that's when I saw it. Under attendees, the usual list of department leads, admin staff, logistics coordinators. But then there it was. A name with a new title next to it. Larissa Kemp, Special Projects Lead. My hand froze over the mouse. Special Projects Lead? That wasn't a title we had. Not in our department, not in our structure. We had senior coordinators, regional supervisors, planning analysts. Everything was boxed in tidy rows on a laminated flowchart that hadn't changed since 2017. And Larissa? She wasn't on any flowchart. I didn't react right away. Didn't clutch my pearls or throw a coffee mug. I just leaned back in my chair and read it again. Once. Then twice. Then a third time slow. She had been with us for what, 4 years? Maybe less. Always running a bit late. Always circling back on things she forgot to follow up on. Smart girl, sure, in that slick, too smooth kind of way. She had a way of making her mistakes look like someone else's lesson. And lately, I'd noticed her hanging around Corbin's office a little more than usual, door half closed, fake laughs drifting down the hallway like perfume. Still, this was new, and it wasn't subtle. I clicked out of the email, sat back, and stared at the framed photo on my desk, my daughter and I, taken the day she moved to Ohio. She said, I always looked calm in pictures. I didn't feel calm now. The clock read 7:52 a.m. Plenty of time before the meeting, but not enough to talk myself out of the knot in my stomach. A part of me wanted to believe it was a clerical mistake. Maybe it was a placeholder title. Maybe Corbin had slapped it in as a draft and forgot to change it back. But the more I thought about it, the more that old ache came creeping in, the kind that knows when something isn't a surprise at all. just the moment it finally shows its face. And I knew. The worst thing about a bad decision isn't when it's made out of ignorance. It's when someone makes it wide awake, eyes open, smiling. That's when it sticks. That's when it stays with you. So yeah, that Monday morning wasn't loud, wasn't stormy, but something had broken, quiet and sharp, right under the surface. And deep down, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be the last crack. You'd think after nearly 2 decades in the same office, you'd stop hoping for anything to feel personal. But hope sneaks in when you're not paying attention, especially when you still believe your work means something. That Tuesday morning, I sat in conference room B with my usual notepad and coffee, third chair from the end. Corbin stood at the front like he was auditioning for a TED Talk, pacing in that slow, practiced way, like he'd rehearsed every sentence in front of his bathroom mirror. The slideshow behind him was full of meaningless words: agility, restructuring, data innovation. None of it said anything, and yet people were nodding along like it did. "We're entering a new chapter at ClearSpan," he announced with a smile that never quite landed. "To lead our operational data transformation initiative, we're appointing Larissa as special projects lead. Her creativity and adaptability are exactly what this company needs as we move forward." Applause followed. Light, hesitant at first. I didn't clap. I couldn't. My jaw didn't tighten. My hands didn't tremble. But inside, something coiled up and wouldn't let go. Creativity and adaptability. That's how he framed it. Never mind that I'd written the original architecture plan for the database back in 2018, trained the first analytics team, troubleshot every bug since. But none of that got mentioned. I looked at Larissa. She smiled, demure and polished, like she didn't know she was standing on ground someone else had laid brick by brick. Or maybe she did. Either way, she wasn't looking at me. The meeting went on another 15 minutes. I didn't hear most of it. I just stared down at the corner of my notepad, where I doodled a small triangle and then pressed my pen so hard into the paper it almost tore. Back at my desk, I felt displaced, like I was floating somewhere just a few inches above my chair. The phone rang, emails pinged. The day carried on like nothing happened. But everything had shifted. No announcement, no warning. Just a new title, a round of applause, and a quiet theft that no one seemed to notice. Or maybe someone did. Later that afternoon, while I was copying files onto the shared drive, one of the newer logistics analysts, Michael, I think his name was, walked past my desk, then doubled back. "Hey," he said in a low voice, "this might be nothing, but I heard Larissa didn't actually write the report she sent out last week. Any idea who helped her with that?" I looked up. He was young, probably late 20s. Still had that cautious curiosity you lose after a few promotions and a couple disappointments. I blinked slowly. "No idea," I said, flat and even. Then I clicked my mouse and went back to my screen. He hesitated. "Right. Okay. Just thought I'd ask." When he walked away, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I wasn't mad at him. He didn't mean harm. But I'd spent the last few weeks patching Larissa's sloppy charts and rewriting half her summaries, thinking I was doing what needed to be done to keep the team functional. I'd told myself I was covering for the process, not for her. I was wrong. There's this idea people throw around about being a team player. That phrase has been used to shut women like me up for years. Stay quiet. Be helpful. Don't rock the boat. Let the credit go where it needs to. Just keep things moving. Except sometimes the boat deserves to be rocked. I stayed late that night, though I didn't need to. I told myself I was just finishing some end-of-month reconciliations. Truth is, I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not with all that noise still buzzing in my head. By the time I got home, the house was dark. I reheated leftovers, sat at the kitchen counter, and opened my laptop. I went straight to the folder labeled Team Shared Reports. Scrolled down until I found the file, final_daily ops docs. I opened it, read through the formatting, tracked the edits. Last modified by Edith Stroud. There it was. Quiet proof. No fanfare. Just a little digital footprint saying I had done the work, again without a name on the title slide or a mention in a meeting. I didn't cry. Didn't sigh. Just stared at the screen for a moment, then clicked the red X in the corner and hit Don't Save. That small act of closing the file without preserving it felt like walking away from a conversation I'd been forced into for too long. I pushed the laptop closed, washed my plate, turned off the kitchen light. That night, I slept without setting an alarm. I caught Corbin in the hallway 2 days after the announcement. He was coming out of the IT office, holding a branded tumbler and tapping at his phone like the world owed him attention. I didn't plan the moment. It just happened. Maybe it had been building without me knowing it. "Corbin," I called, calm as a breeze. He looked up, still half-scrolling, and gave me the kind of smile you save for someone you think you've already won against. "Hey there. Everything good?" I nodded once. "Just a quick thing." He stopped walking, tilted his head politely, but his eyes already looked 2 steps ahead of the conversation. "Larissa's new project," I said. "Isn't that the framework I designed back in 2020? The operational mapping for the freight audit system." He chuckled, the way people do when they're pretending to be surprised. "You've got a great memory." I gave him a half-smile. "So, she's leading it now?" "Well," he said, his voice shifting into that careful, padded tone he used when he wanted to sound visionary. "We have to make space for fresh thinking. You've been such a solid pillar for so long, Evelyn. I mean, that foundation's there because of you. But now it's time to explore new approaches." I let a pause hang between us, just long enough to make it uncomfortable. "And who decided that?" I asked, still level. "I did," he said simply. "I have full discretion over departmental structuring." I nodded again, more slowly this time. Not because I agreed, because I finally understood something. That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't being passed over because I lacked experience. I wasn't being ignored because I failed to innovate. I was being boxed out because I was predictable, manageable, easy to contain. Corbin didn't want excellence. He wanted compliance. He didn't wait for me to say anything else. Just offered that smile again, patted my shoulder in a performative kind of way, and walked off toward the elevators. I stood there a beat longer than I needed to, hand in my pocket, thumb rubbing the edge of a folded sticky note I'd stuffed there earlier. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just exposed. I'd been telling myself all along that showing up, delivering, keeping the peace, that it would earn me safety. But what it actually earned me was invisibility. The more I cleaned up after other people, the more they assumed the mess wasn't theirs to begin with. That afternoon, I left work a little earlier than usual and drove down to Three Pines Cafe, the one just past the ridge where the city stops pretending it's a city. I figured I'd grab something hot, take a breath, maybe flip through my notebook before heading home. And that's when I saw her. June Hallberg. She was sitting alone by the window, same seat she used to claim during our lunch breaks 5 years ago. Her hair had gone a bit whiter, but she still had that way of folding her hands around a mug like the world slowed down for her on command. I didn't plan to say anything. Honestly, I almost walked out. But she looked up, saw me, smiled without hesitation. "Well, I'll be," she said. "Didn't expect to see your face around here." I let out a half-laugh and pulled the chair opposite hers without asking.
"Same.
"I figured you moved out of state." "Thought about it," she said, but the mountain air kept me grounded. We made small talk for a few minutes. Weather, the city's new traffic pattern, a mutual friend's retirement. She didn't ask about work. Not right away. But then she leaned in, gently, and looked at me the way only people who've known your better years can. "You're carrying something. What is it?" I exhaled. "Same place. Same grind. But it's starting to feel like I'm standing in a house I helped build, and no one remembers I laid the first brick." She didn't respond right away. Just took a sip of her tea. Then, quietly, "If this was your daughter, what would you tell her to do?" That stopped me cold. It's the kind of question that slices through pride, excuses, and habit all at once. Because you know what the answer is. You just don't want to admit it. I stared out the window. The street outside shimmered under late afternoon light. People walked their dogs, held paper bags full of groceries, looked like they had somewhere better to be. "I don't know," I murmured. June didn't press me. She just nodded like someone who understood that sometimes silence is its own kind of answer. But something inside me had shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just a tiny, unmistakable crack in the wall I'd been leaning on for too long. It started with a mistake. A careless one, but one that landed like a firecracker in a quiet room. Late Wednesday morning, an internal email dropped into everyone's inbox. Subject line read, "Updated performance summary for review." Sent by Larissa. Nothing out of the ordinary at first glance. I almost ignored it. But the second I opened the attachment, my stomach did a slow, familiar turn. It wasn't the final version. It wasn't even close. What Larissa had uploaded, likely by accident, was the raw draft, the one riddled with comments, corrections, track changes, margin notes. And there it was, clear as day at the top of every page. Edited by Yvette Stroud. Not just once. Page after page, my initials lit up the screen like breadcrumbs. Typos corrected. Data ranges fixed. Whole paragraphs reworded. It was the kind of thing I'd done a dozen times before, quietly in the background, telling myself I was just helping the process, not the person. But now the curtain had slipped. I clicked through the document slowly, not sure if I wanted to laugh or shut my laptop and scream into a pillow. In the quiet hum of the office, I could already feel the shift. A couple folks passed my desk a little slower than usual. Michael, the same young analyst who'd asked me that pointed question earlier, caught my eye and gave a small, knowing nod. Nobody said anything out loud, but sometimes silence speaks loudest. By mid-afternoon, the file had been pulled from the shared folder. A corrected version was uploaded, clean and polished. No track changes. No footnotes. No mention of me. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Instead, when the clock hit 4 o'clock, I grabbed my coat and drove across town, past the freeway, out toward the old brick church with the blue door, St. Barrow's. I hadn't been there in months. Not because I lost faith. I just hadn't needed the quiet as badly until now. There were no services that day. The sanctuary was empty, the lights dimmed. I sat in the third pew from the back, hands folded in my lap, breathing slower than usual. I didn't pray. Not in the way people usually think of it. I just sat, listening. For once, not to everyone else, but to myself. I thought about that silence I'd kept for years. The kind people praise you for. The good sport silence. The "she's so dependable" silence. I used to think that was humility. I used to think it made me honorable. But now it felt like something else entirely. Like I'd been holding my breath for so long, I'd forgotten what my own voice sounded like. And worse, I'd let other people decide what my work was worth just because I didn't speak up to correct them. My mother used to say, sometimes peace isn't quiet. It's honesty. I sat there for 20 more minutes. I didn't cry. But there was this pressure somewhere between my ribs and my spine, like a splinter finally worked its way free. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a subtle crack, the kind that tells you a dam isn't breaking, but it won't hold forever either. By the time I left, the sun was just starting to slide behind the steeple. I didn't feel better, exactly. But I did feel clearer. The next morning, I got to the office early. Earlier than usual. I bypassed the break room, went straight to the printer near the end of the hall, the old one nobody liked because it jammed on labels. I fed it pages anyway. Report logs. Historical summaries. System flowcharts. Spreadsheets with formulas I'd created from scratch. At the bottom of every document, my name, my initials, my footprints. I clipped them into folders, labeled everything neatly. No show. No drama. Just facts. Then I printed one more document, a one-pager. No graphs, no tables. Just my full name and a short line typed underneath. In case we forget who did the work. I stuck it on top of the last folder with a paper clip, slid it into my bag, and walked to my desk. I didn't say a word to anyone that day. Didn't need to. That was the last kind of silence I'd let carry someone else's name. Monday meetings had always been a drag, but that one burned. Corbin stood at the front of the room with his usual performance stance, feet planted like he was addressing a conference hall, not a dozen tired employees half running on caffeine and broken sleep. "I just want to take a moment," he said, pausing like he was delivering eulogy, to recognize Evelyn for her behind-the-scenes support on the data transition. That kind of quiet teamwork is what keeps this department going. Let's all take note of that. There it was. A sentence wrapped in velvet, with the sting of a slap. I didn't speak. I didn't shift. But my blood went still. Not because I was surprised. No, I'd stopped expecting fairness a while ago. But the way he said it, as if I'd been offering charity, not responsibility, landed deep. Like I was being thanked for a favor instead of being credited for my own work. I felt myself disconnect in real time. Everyone around me just kind of nodded along, maybe a few gave polite smiles, but no one looked at me. Not really. They were used to me blending in. Reliable Evelyn. Dependable Evelyn. Here since the merger Evelyn. I didn't clap. I folded my hands, stared down at the edge of the table, and listened as he moved on to the next agenda item like my name had been a brief footnote. Later that afternoon, I walked past his office. His door was open and he was laughing, really laughing with Larissa. The kind of laugh people reserve for those they favor, those they bet on. I kept walking. I didn't feel anger, not the kind that boils over. It was colder than that. A steady recognition that I'd just watched a story be rewritten in real time, and the version they would remember didn't have me in it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, and I made a list. No titles. No frills. Just bullet points. Audit restructure template. Designed by me. A load tracking analysis dashboard. Implemented Q3FY19. Warehouse reconciliation tool. Built from scratch. Carrier compliance overhaul, sole author. Page after page. I didn't stop until my hand cramped. Then I typed it all up and emailed it to myself. I didn't even put a subject line. Just sent it. Saved a copy to my USB, labeled it simply, legacy_work_test. That felt like armor. Not a weapon, armor. Something to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. Before bed, I stood at the window, watching the neighbor's porch light blink on. A breeze rolled through the trees, and I could almost hear my mother's voice, somewhere in the back of my memory. One of her old church sayings. I was taught to turn the other cheek, I whispered. But nowhere did it say I had to stay in the same room. That stuck with me. See, the world loves a woman who stays quiet, who works hard without asking for credit, who fills in the gaps without drawing attention to the cracks. But that night, for the first time in a long while, I started to question whether staying was really strength, or just a habit dressed up as loyalty. I turned off the lights. The kitchen fell into soft darkness. And I knew something had begun. Quiet, maybe, but definite. Not revenge. Not rebellion. Just the start of a decision that had been a long time coming. Thursday started like any other, until it didn't. Around 10:15, a ripple moved through the office. The freight audit team's biggest client hadn't received their weekly data report. Phones rang. Slack messages flew. Everyone looked busy trying to look innocent. Then Corbin stepped out of his office. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Just clapped his hands once and said, "Folks, we've had a minor oversight. Let's tighten things up. Evelyn, can you help Larissa get the revised report out by lunch? Use the old template if you have to." Just like that. No acknowledgement. No explanation. Just an assumption that I would slide in like I always did, quiet, efficient, erasing someone else's mess with a smile. I looked at him, then at Larissa, who was already turning toward me with that familiar shrug, like, "Oops, my bad, again." And I finally said it, loud enough, calm enough. "No, I think she should handle it herself. I don't manage that system anymore." "That's what you said, right?" The silence that followed had texture. Larissa blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Corbin didn't react right away. His jaw tensed just slightly, the way it always did when someone went off script. Then he gave me a look, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and said, "We'll regroup later." But we didn't. He retreated to his office. Larissa sat back down and started fumbling through her files. And I went back to my desk feeling clean. Not proud. Not smug. Just like I'd finally stopped carrying something that wasn't mine. That afternoon, I took a longer lunch and drove down to Three Pines again. I didn't even check to see if June was there. I just knew she would be. She was seated by the same window, a book open in front of her, glasses low on her nose. When I walked in, she looked up like she'd been expecting me. I slid into the seat across from her and didn't bother with small talk. They tried to pull me in again, I said. Pretend like it's normal to be the safety net for someone who never learns. June didn't look surprised. She just sipped her tea and waited. I told them no, I added. First time, maybe ever. That got a small nod from her. The kind you give when someone finally steps out of the circle they've been pacing for years. She didn't offer praise. Didn't say I was brave. She just said, there are times when kindness keeps us human, but there are also times when it keeps us trapped. I sat with that. Then she added, some kindness is just fear wearing a nice dress. I didn't say anything for a while. Neither did she. We just watched the cars roll past outside, the afternoon sun throwing long stripes of shadow across the cafe floor. When I got back to the office, I didn't go to my desk right away. I walked into the break room, made a fresh cup of coffee, stood quietly by the window, and let it hit me. I was done. Not just tired. Not just frustrated. Done. That evening, I wrote my resignation letter. 4 sentences. No bitterness. No drama. Just clarity. Effective 2 weeks from today, I will be resigning from my position. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute. My decision is final. All documentation will be transitioned accordingly. I printed 2 copies. Signed both. Slid one into a plain envelope. Folded the other and kept it in my purse. For once, it felt like I was finally doing something for myself, without apology, without explanation, and without delay. Thursday morning came quiet and bright. The kind of morning that usually felt like a clean slate. But not that day. That day felt like closing a book I should have set down years ago. The department meeting was already in motion when I walked in. Corbin stood near the projector, talking through next quarter's projections like nothing had shifted, like everything was still his version of fine. The team sat around the table, scribbling notes, nodding in that automatic way people do when they've stopped listening but still want to look engaged. I didn't sit down. I pulled the envelope from my bag and stepped forward. Corbin, I said steady and even. I have something for you. He turned mid-sentence a little thrown off. Sure. What's this? I handed it to him. My resignation. Effective in 2 weeks. The room stopped breathing. His hand hovered for a second before taking the envelope. He glanced around, then at me. Evelyn, maybe we should. No. I cut in gently. This won't take long. I turned to face the group, the same group I'd spent years training, covering for, leading without the title. My voice didn't waver. It didn't need to. I used to think that if you just did your job well enough, quietly enough, people would notice. That hard work and integrity would speak for themselves. I paused. Larissa wouldn't meet my eyes. Her shoulders had drawn in tight, like she wanted to disappear into her chair. I was wrong, I said. Turns out, the quieter you are, the easier it is for someone else to take credit for your voice. Corbin's expression tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I could tell he didn't know what to say. That was satisfying in its own way. I'm leaving because I finally realized that loyalty to people who use you isn't noble. It's just misplaced. A couple of people shifted in their seats. Not in discomfort, just awareness. Recognition. I'm not angry, I added. I'm just done confusing endurance for respect. And that was it. No fireworks. No yelling. Just the sound of someone choosing herself for the first time in too long. I walked back to my desk and began to pack. No rush. No fanfare. I took my time sorting through folders, unplugging my mouse, carefully placing the framed photo of my daughter into my tote. I moved quietly, but not timidly. Every motion was deliberate. Before I left, I walked to Larissa's desk. She was staring at her monitor, not typing, not pretending, just sitting still. I placed a manila folder on top of her notepad. Inside was the full documentation of the freight reporting system, with annotations and backup logs, everything I had ever created to make that machine run smoothly. On the top, a handwritten note. This is what real work looks like. Make sure you learn from it. She didn't look up. I didn't wait for her to. As I walked down the hall, a few people followed me quietly. No hugs. Just presence. Michael from Analytics gave me a small nod, almost a bow. Another coordinator, Dana, opened the door for me without saying a word, her eyes glassy. And then, just as I was about to step outside, I felt a light touch on my elbow. Raphael, the youngest on the team, still in his first year, still carrying too much hope to be fully jaded yet. He slipped something into the side pocket of my bag. Don't open it now, he said. I smiled. All right. Some of us were watching, he added, voice low. And we'll remember. Then he stepped back, and I walked out into the daylight. I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't owe anyone anything. Not an explanation. Not an apology. Not one more day. Mornings at Morgan Creek Supply are quieter. Not just because the team is smaller or because the break room doesn't have that obnoxious humming refrigerator like the old office did. It's a different kind of quiet. The kind where people listen when you speak and don't look over your shoulder when you pause. I only work 3 days a week now. Enough to stay sharp, contribute, and sleep at night without knots in my stomach. My title doesn't carry a leadership stripe anymore, but I've never felt more respected. People ask questions and wait for the answers. They don't nod politely and change nothing. That morning, I made a fresh pot of coffee before the first meeting. I stood by the window near the loading dock, sipping slowly, watching the early sun stretch long shadows across the lot. There's a calm in that part of the day, before things start moving and expectations begin piling up. My phone buzzed with a notification, an email from a name I hadn't seen in a while. Dana, from ClearSpan. She kept it short. Just thought you'd want to know. Larissa's project is falling apart. Client reports missed 3 weeks in a row. Leadership's finally noticing. Rumor is they're auditing Corbin's last few decisions. No one's saying your name out loud, but they're not questioning it anymore either. I read it twice. Then once more, slower. No vindication. No gloating. Just quiet confirmation of what I already knew. Pretending someone's noise is brilliance doesn't make it so. I didn't reply. Just archived the email and set the phone face down on the table. Later that afternoon, I found something else waiting in my company mailbox. A small envelope with no return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside, a simple card. On the front, just a pencil sketch of a cracked glass being held together by gold seams. Inside, Raphael's writing. Thanks for teaching me that silence isn't always golden. Sometimes it's surrender. I read it twice, then tucked it gently into the drawer next to my mother's photo. The same photo that had sat on every desk I'd ever had. Her smile in that picture was soft but steady. She used to tell me, you don't have to be nice to be worthy. You just have to be honest. With yourself, first. That voice never left me. It just got buried under years of being agreeable. Before the day ended, I drove over to Three Pines Cafe. Same old booths, same chipped counters. I didn't go to catch up with anyone. I just wanted to sit in a place that reminded me of when I first started to wake up. I chose the corner booth by the window. No laptop. No agenda. Just a cup of black coffee and the sound of ceramic clinking in the background. At the next table over, 2 women were talking. One looked barely 30, if that. She wore her exhaustion like makeup she forgot to wash off. I just keep thinking, she said to her friend, if I stay quiet, they'll see how much I care. You know, that I'm not trying to cause trouble. Just doing my part. Her friend didn't respond right away. But I heard it. I didn't turn around. Didn't interrupt. But something flickered in my chest. Familiar. Faint. I'd been that woman once, hoping silence would buy me clarity. Maybe even respect. It never did. I took another sip of coffee and let the thought go. There's no need to save everyone. Sometimes it's enough to walk out of the fire and leave the door open behind you. When I got home that evening, I didn't turn on the news. I didn't check my email. I watered my plants, reheated a bowl of soup, and sat by the window until the sky turned the color of soft steel. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. I don't miss ClearSpan. Not even a little. Because what I finally understand is this. I don't have to stay in rooms that ask me to make myself small. And I don't need anyone's permission to leave. Sometimes, it's not about grand gestures or dramatic exits. Sometimes it's just about quietly choosing yourself, after years of not doing so. If this story reminded you of a time you stayed silent to keep the peace, or gave more than you received, I hope you know you're not alone. Have you ever walked away from something not out of anger, but out of clarity? If this story touched something in you, I'd be honored to have you here next time. Until then, take care of your voice. It matters more than you think.